Hello guys, Panzermeister36 here. Today's video is going to be a product review on these sets right here. We have two sets of 3D printed tool clamps from MJ Miniatures. 3D printing is definitely the new big thing in this hobby, and one of the main ways that it is being used is to replace what would have usually been a very complicated assembly of photoetched parts. With 3D printing you can get almost as fine detail as metal photoetched parts, and these are no exception. They are incredibly fine. I'm going to review both these sets, but we're going to mainly be focusing on the German ones because that's kind of more my style, and there is more in this set, and we're also going to look at applying them to my King Tiger. I actually ordered these sets when they were new back in February, but I was unable to get them because of the pandemic. There was no shipping from Korea to basically any country, so that was fine. I got these in August, so it was like 7 months or so. But if you're going to order some of these, make sure that they can actually ship to your country, because it kind of sucks to pay for something and then not to get it for a long time. But I've got them now, so let's do a review anyways. These are still fairly new products. The US Army set has just tool clasps. They're more like leather belts that are folded over and buckled down. These are used on anything from a Sherman, a Pershing, to a Willys Jeep. These are really applicable to a lot of vehicles, and they can probably be used on maybe even some British tanks as well. And of course, Lend-Lease vehicles are no exception. We have actually two types, or two styles. You can kind of tell the difference here. You can see that on this side, these ones are kind of like going over that way, and these ones are folded back. I think that's just so that you have some options. If they're side by side, you can make them look a little bit different. You can see kind of here, we'll look closely at these in a second, but there's basically like a little bar that's simulated, and then the belt kind of goes through that and then would go around the tool handle and then back over, and it's kind of buckled down. The German Army set has a little bit more in it. We have more different types of clamps. We have traditional clamps that would be used to hold on things like axes, sledgehammers, wire cutters, etc. And we also have these guys here, which are clamps for the tow cable, and these are also clamps for the tow cable along with some barrel cleaning rod segments. Now, these barrel cleaning rod and tow cable clamps are only used on Tiger 1 and Tiger 2, and also things like Jagdtiger that are based on those chassis, Sturm Tiger, so on. You cannot use those on really anything else because they're not there. They have different styles of mounting cables. The actual main tool clamps, these can be also used on some other tanks like Panzer 1, Panzer 2, Panzer 3 I believe, Stug 3, except Stug 3 SFG has other types of clamps in specific locations, and then also Tiger 1, Tiger 2. Some tanks like a Panther, I believe a Panzer 4, and some other ones use something called a Type 2 clamp. These are Type 1 clamps. And the Type 2 clamp, I'll post some photos up in the corner. The photos are from Adam Mann's channel. He has an excellent channel like mine, and he builds models, and he also has some accessories from original Panzer tanks that he collects. So there are two types of clamps. There is Type 1, which we have in this set, which uses a kind of like a forked end with a bar to latch, and then the Type 2 clamp, which you would see mainly on something like a Panther and some other tanks, I believe Panzer 4. Those have a different style of clamp that has more of like a hooked flat end that just rolls over and then grabs onto a lip. So they're a little bit more square, and they have like a little bump in the bottom as well that kind of juts up. So yeah, if you want to be super accurate, these can only be applied to certain tanks, but I doubt anybody would really care if you put these clamps on a Panther, because they're very small and it's really hard to tell the difference anyways, and we're getting into the crazy fine stuff now. On the backs of the boxes we have some details showing how to remove the support material, which is actually very easy. You just kind of cut away with your sprue cutters, you just kind of snip across the whole thing, and then you can get in there with like a file or a knife and sand away any excess. It's basically like cleaning up any part as you cut off the sprue. This is fairly basic. These guys are a little bit tricky because there's a lot of different parts there, and the handle's very fine. but I found that it generally doesn't break, it just kind of bends, and you just bend it back. So that's alright. And then for the Sherman US style, we have similar. Here is what we get in the US set. As you can see, we have kind of like 7 sections. 4 of them have the clamps one way, 3 have it the other way. These kind of like dividers are meant so that you can cut it very easily into smaller sections, and then you have kind of an easier way to get in from the side and clip away at the support material. Here we can see the differences of the 2 types that you get. Again, they're very similar, but they're just a little bit different. They are also incredibly thin. It's going to be hard to get a focus at the side there, but they're like verging on photo etch thickness. I'll compare the German ones to some photo etch clamps in a minute. Also, you might be able to notice that there's like the hints of some, I don't know what you call it, the edging, because the way these are printed, they kind of print them vertically in a bunch of layers. So on any thing that's a curved surface, it's not built up at once, it's built up in a bunch of different passes as it kind of builds up. So you can maybe notice like almost like vertical lines in some places, but it's really, really fine. And I imagine that if you spray, let's say, primer over your model, it'll probably get filled up no problem. And you're also probably going to paint these with a brush with some like leather color, which will probably also be a thick enough application of paint to cover those like microscopic edges. But yeah, these look crazy good. Alright, for the German set, you can see I already popped out one of the sections to make it easier to remove some of those clamps there. And we have kind of like 2 sets of normal clamps. We've got 1 row of the small barrel, or sorry, small tow cable clamps. We got the big tow cable clamps, and we have the barrel cleaning rods here. And then the whole thing is kind of mirrored on this side, but it actually says upside down, sorry. It says early over here and late over here. So kind of like this whole thing is supposed to be early, and this is all late. Now, there are actually no early and late German tool clamps. There are type 1, type 2, but they're not early and late. And as far as I can tell, there is no difference between the early and the late, apart from the fact that the late normal tool clamps are slightly longer than the early ones. And that's actually a thing because there are different sizes of tool clamp, because there are different sizes of tool. There's very small ones for a shovel, medium ones for things like axe handles and sledgehammer handles, I believe. And then the things like the wire cutters, since they have actually 2 handles, they use a very wide one. So there are definitely different sizes. They're not early and late, but I mean, I'm not complaining. They've given us a medium and a large size tool clamp basically. So on my King Tiger, I use the medium ones everywhere, and then I use a larger one for the wire cutters. Alright, so here's a closer look at the German clamps, and they are also super, super fine. Like, look at the thickness of that handle. That is crazy fine. And let's compare that to a photo etch tool clamp. I mean, it's like wider because it's not photo etch metal, but it's also verging on photo etch thickness. It's crazy. Same thing from the side. Might be hard to see, but like the actual thickness of resin around the top of that clamp is very, 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 very fine. Compared to our photo etch guy, it's almost the same. I'm also going to compare with these guys here, if I can get a good focus. These are the Zavod 3D printed tool clamps. These were the first option that was available. These are from a website called Shapeways, which is a website where you can order anything 3D printed basically. So we have type 2 there, Panther, type 1 up here. Again, you can see the differences. And these are noticeably thicker. If you look at the sides, and also with the handles, they are noticeably thicker than the MJ ones, if I can get a good angle. This is tricky. But still not bad. One thing I noticed is that the Zavod ones are actually a little bit more accurate, because It's going to be tricky to get that on the shot, but there are in reality 2 little rivets on the Type 1 clamp. Type 2 doesn't have this. But on the Type 1 clamp there's 2 little rivets on the top bar. There are 2 little rivets there in reality because there's a piece of leather riveted in place that actually kind of cradles the handle of the tool. These guys don't have it because they are perfectly smooth up there. There's really there's no edging on these guys. The curved ones here, it's not visible. Some of these ones at the end, these ones are for the tow cable. Because they're angled, as you can see, they kind of show some edging. It's like impossible to see because it's so fine. But I just took care of that with a couple of passes with a hobby knife. I had a man point out to me that these should actually not be angled. They should be perfectly flat, like a box, like a square. But on King Tiger, it looks like they are angled somewhat. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's, again, we're getting into the crazy fine details here. Looks good enough to me to use on a Tiger, but I don't know. That's pretty good. I figured for the video I would show you how do I put on one of these clamps. We're going to go with this guy because, remember, it's angled, so I did a little bit of cleanup with my hobby knife. Haven't done that yet, but it's basically just like this. That's pretty much all you need. Again, the edges are super fine, so probably don't even need to bother with this really, but I'm doing it just in case because it takes 5 seconds. Now I take my Tamiya sprue cutters, and where the base material kind of meets up with it, there's a gate. So I'm just going to cut it. You can see the rest of the gate on there. So again, I'm just going to kind of cut it away with my cutters, and I can use a knife or a file to remove anything that's left over. Alright, that's pretty good. Let's put it on the model. I'm going to use the VMS Flexi 5K CA, but any CA glue should be fine. This is just resin, so you can't use plastic cement. Off camera, I'm just applying a little bit to the ends, the 2 little legs of the tool clamp, you know, the 2 little guys at the bottom. And then we can put this where it belongs on our King Tiger if I don't drop it first. And that's about it. On my models, I really like to use these 3D printed tool clamps or photoetched ones when I have the chance, but usually 3D because they're easier to work with, because it gives me some options in making the tools missing, misplaced, or otherwise kind of moved around, because it's very rare for the tools, if you look at a reference photo, to be all in the right place. It's very common for things like the tow cables to be not all wrapped through the tool clamps because they've already got one end looped and hooked into the tow point in case they need to recover the vehicle in a hurry. You know, they're missing the sledgehammer, the starter crank is actually on the engine deck, stuff like that. It's very rare for everything to be perfect on a tank, and it actually looks a lot more natural to have some of the tools moved around and in different locations. Now, one thing I noticed with these 3D printed tool clamps is that you don't have things like kind of like the bar that would loop over the end of the shovel, or as you can see kind of here, I've got the little guys that hold the end of the sledgehammer in place. You don't have those on this 3D printed set. You just have the actual normal clamps. Now, in most cases, I would just stick with the molded on kind of like holder for the shovel at the end, because it is very small and it just kind of perfectly slots in the shovel in reality, so there wouldn't be a very large gap. But generally on models, the actual tool clamps look like big nasty blobs because they can't model the thin detail of the handle. You can't really model that because it's a plastic part, injection molded. But with these you can actually get that very easily. So yeah, that's kind of what my thoughts are. On this model I've used some photo etch because I had it on hand, but in most cases I would just stick with the plastic parts for the holders at the end of the shovel and sledgehammer and axe and so on, because those look very good. And then for things like the actual handles and the tool clamps, because they usually look like big blobs, that's where this set would come into play, and that kind of matches what they've actually given you in the box. And another nice benefit is that you can actually leave the tools separate for painting by just sliding them out of the tool clamps to paint them, paint all the wood, the metal separately. Don't get access all over your model and so on. And then you just slide it back in when you're done, because you've painted the tank and the tool clamp together in your base camouflage color. That's actually a really handy side benefit of having these aftermarket accessories on your tank. Alright guys, that's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you were interested in these clamps or something similar, I do recommend these. They're a good option. Now, like I said at the beginning, if you're going to order these from MJ Miniatures, make sure that they can ship from Korea to your country, because there are some limitations currently and probably for this foreseeable future. I know there are also other companies that make 3D printed tool clamps. There are the previous Zavod 3D ones I've reviewed before and I compared in the video. There's also T-Rex, which are like a design company that does like the actual design work for models that are then released in plastic by like Meng, for example. That design studio, T-Rex, is actually releasing their own 3D printed tool clamps. I've seen, I think they did a set of fire extinguishers, and I think they also did a set of Panzer IV tool clamps, like a whole Panzer IV tool clamp set. But then the Panzer IV set might have been released by MiG Ammo. I think it's all kind of confusing, but basically there's other options out there. 3D printing is the new thing, and I do like to see that they're trying to replace photo etch, because in a lot of cases photo etch is crazy fiddly work and a lot of people don't like it, but people also do like detail. And if you're somebody who's focused on what people might call rivet counting or whatever, making their models accurate, kind of like myself, I like to make everything accurate, as you can see on this model here, then this is a great option for us, because it allows us to do what we want, but also having a little bit of an easier time with it, because you don't have to fiddle with a lot of photo etch. But if you're somebody who doesn't really care, like to build your models out of the box and just care, you want to have fun, that's fine. You can do whatever you want, just like anybody can do whatever they want if they want their model accurate or out of the box or whatever. There's a lot of options in this hobby. Just have fun, guys. That's what it's all about, right? Anyways, yeah, I'll wrap up this video by saying thank you to my Patreon supporters. They give me a little bit of money every month, which helps me buying the paints and products you guys often see in these videos. For example, stuff like this. And it really helps out this channel, helps me buying the stuff so you guys can see new and cool stuff in my videos. If you can support me, please consider it, because it is very, very helpful and is much appreciated. Anyways, I'll see you guys maybe next week, maybe the week after. I don't know when I have next video up, but soon, I hope. I'll see you guys then. Until then, stay safe, happy modeling, and have fun out there, guys. See ya.